Okay, so we covered 4 things. 1, if we take care of the depth, he takes care of the breadth. 2, pour deeply into the few who will obey no matter what the cost. 3, keep doing what you're doing. We'll get better at it. And 4 is what? Obey and train others. Can't pass on what you don't possess. So what I want to do now before we go through the last 4, I wrote the book. There were only 7 in 7 years. It's actually 8 in 10 years now. So I'm getting older, learning less maybe. But what has stood out to you about everything that's been shared, from the illustration, okay, of addition, multiplication, tell your story, tell God's story, why, who, how, the 7 principles. What has stood out for you guys? So this is like a little debrief before I get into the last 4.
Just a great reminder, you just have to invest in small, in the small if you can. I mean, because I've tried to do the big too, and it wears you out.
Yeah. So if we're all obeying, pouring deeply into the few, that's how it multiplies. That's exponential. Awesome. Somebody else, what stood out? You can ask questions too. We're debriefing. Yeah.
How important verbiage is, and how important to keep it brief. I love how you critiqued. I really thrive on critiquing and receiving criticism like that. And so I felt like that was really helpful to end with a question and start, a certain way. I felt like that was really helpful.
So to build on that, that's awesome. So you cannot, when you start at 0 with anybody, okay, you cannot love someone into competency. Oh, you're going to be so good at this. It's amazing. Oh, you're great. You're awesome. You have to give direction.
Right.
You have to actually give direction before encouragement comes, okay? Or you can do it, but you got to try.
Right.
And then you got to correct. So that's what we call developmentally D1 through D4, okay? They progress. When it gets really hard, it was stop telling them what to do, though. What do you think you should do? How is God speaking to you? You can do that. That's a great idea. You go from less direction to more encouragement as people process through core competencies. That's what discipleship is. So, great observation. That was encouragement. Yes.
I think, especially when you came by and I was trying to explain something, to simplify it. Why complicate things then? It's simple.
You're actually that. We're going to talk about that next. It's number 5. It's a great segue. Somebody else.
It's all biblical.
There is that. Yes.
Why, who, how?
Why, who, how? Who are we? Why, who, how? I love, so you guys got to know, they do that across many tribes in Africa, man. What tribe are we? Why, who, how? It's so cool. We remember it though, don't we? Yeah, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that illustration, when you're training, it's the one thing that I love doing this with smaller groups, right? Because, but when we have more, it's like a great illustrative tool that's a visual of the difference between the two while still honoring. We're not in competition, okay? But I think we need all kinds of churches, but we need a lot more of those simple ones that can multiply for us to actually see what our Father's heart is for every person, every people, every place. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
I think just obedience, overcoming fear, just being available.
See, that's my favorite one. It's hey, we win if we don't quit. I'm not going to quit. I come too far. I just can't. I'm not going to quit. If we don't quit, we win. So, praise God. Yes, sir.
Simple, personal.
Amen. All right. So, I'm going to try and land this plane with the last 4 things. And so, the 5th thing is Simple things grow, simple things multiply, complex things do not. So I could do a silly illustration here. So good things multiply, bad things multiply. But watch this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do simple things grow, simple things multiply. I'm going to use you, okay? Give me a piece of paper. There you go. Just tear one out. Okay. So he's going to, it's okay. I need for you to share this with one person, okay? And then you can, then after you share it with that one person, they can share, okay? And then you can go and share with another person and they can share, okay? So you're sharing, okay? But they have to share that. Don't go till I tell you to, okay?
Am I making it or
Yeah.
explaining it?
Yeah. No. You're just making that, okay? You're showing that to them. They have to draw it, okay? You have to see it, okay? Then they have to pass it on.
Okay.
Got it? That's the picture.
Gotcha.
Got it?
Yep.
So, okay, give me your pen.
Oh.
Thank you. Nope, not yet. Sit. Okay? All right, somebody else? Okay? Ha, Luke 2. Here we go. Piece of paper. This one.
Here we go.
Here's a picture. The same thing, okay? Is I want you to be able to pass that on to one other person, okay? And then they have to draw that, okay? And then they have to pass that on to other people, and they have to pass it on. So once you make it, your person shows it to you, okay? You have to do it, okay? Then you have to pass it on. Are you following me?
So I have to make it?
You have to make it.
Okay.
You took my pen.
Hey, sorry.
So I have to make it to someone
You have to
else.
make it, show it to them. They have to show it to you, okay? Then they have to go. They have to
Okay.
see it. They have to see it,
They have to do it,
do it,
and then go.
and then they
do
can
it.
go and share it.
Okay.
Okay? Then after they do that, when they go do that, you can go get another one, okay?
Do you need me to show you I can do it?
No, I think you got
Okay.
it. Okay, here. All right, one more. I need one other person, okay? Who do I want to pick on, okay? Who do I want to vote? You can't leave yet. You guys can't go and do this yet. This is simple things grow, simple things multiply. Yeah, you're getting picked on. Here we go. I need a piece of paper. Okay? Now I got a pen. I took his pen. I'll give it back. Okay? Needs to tear it out. Okay, so you have to be able to draw this for them, okay? And then you have to see them draw it back, and then they have to pass it on, okay? We'll just do it on this one, okay? So here it is. So we need to do this, this.
So I draw it for them and then make sure they draw it back.
Yep, and then do that. That.
Got it.
Oh, yeah. And then I forgot. I have to do that. Okay, so they have to be able to show that to them. They have to be able to do that, okay? And then they can go and do it, okay? Got it? All right, so what we're going to do, you understand? So you got to show it to them. They have to be able to reproduce it back, okay? And then they have to go and do that to somebody else. Show it to somebody else, okay? They get it and pass it on, okay? This is an illustration of simple things grow, simple things multiply. I'll give us 3 minutes. Go.
Okay.
Go. All right. Pick whoever you want. Oh, yeah, you got to draw it. Yeah. She's got to be able to do it. Everybody's got to be able to do it. Yeah, got to be able to do it. Yeah. No, you can go again. You can keep going. After you make a disciple. All right, hurry. once you've drawn it, after you've done it, go make a disciple. We're showing that simple things grow, simple things multiply. Keep going. Everybody should be passing on. You can do it. You can show others how to do it, and they can go do it. Hey, here's a guy that's not been reached yet. Yeah, this guy's unreached. Who has not been reached yet? Who's unreached? Oh, this guy's unreached, man. Whoa. There you go. Let's get everybody. Let's reach. Nobody's unreached. Nobody's unreached, Bob. Get it? Bob, we got to reach everybody. Go do it.
Has anybody not been helped?
This guy's lost over here, man. He's the pastor. He's and he's not sharing. He's not sharing. Look at him. He's not sharing. Wow.
I think we're good, man.
All right, here we go. We go back to our seats. Back to your seats. Back to your seats. All right. I don't know if I'm still on. Here we go. All right. These are the three pictures. Everybody here. If you have this picture, this was shown to you, and you were able to reproduce it, okay? How many? Raise your hand if you have a smiley face. All right, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 smiley faces. Okay, well, awesome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right, who's got a frowny face? Okay, here we go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Cool? Okay, 12. All right. I just gave up on that thing. Still, big numbers there, right? Okay. All right. How many people have this monstrosity? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. All right. Oh, my bad. Oh, you weren't done yet, man. You didn't get it done. Yeah. Okay, simple things grow, simple things multiply, complex things do not, okay? So this is illustrative that's pretty simple, right? That's pretty simple, right? That's pretty complex, right? And not even that complex, right? But you got to draw it. You got to make sure that they can do it, okay? So here's, what do we learn from this, okay? Is that good things can multiply, right? Bad things can multiply. Cancer multiplies. We don't want to multiply cancer. We got to be disciples worth multiplying. But complex things do not multiply. Make sense? So what we're looking to do is to pour deeply into the few with simple tools that can multiply. Disciples, leaders, churches, and businesses. Simple things grow. Simple things multiply. What else did you learn about that? Like you had to, how many times did you have to draw that for them to get this? How many times did that take? One time, right? Were they able to do it after you actually drew it for them? Like immediately, right? Fast, right? And they could immediately pass it on too, right? What's a disciple? One that hears, obeys. Are you seeing what I'm saying? There you go. That's number 5. Number 6. It's amazing the way that they're on the, 6. It is always relational before it's organizational. So let me point out something in our context where we have challenges. We have short relational ties, and we think organizationally, not relationally. We do. We want to think about how to organize it before we have it. Like people will take this training and they'll go, oh, let me show you how I can make that better. All right, not arguing with you, but that's not going to work. You have to do it. You have to make one disciple. You have to model. You have to model and assist. Like, watch this. If you don't know how to tell your story, you never practice it, you can't teach somebody, train somebody how to do it. If you don't ever share the gospel, you can't train somebody to share the gospel. If you don't have a simple church that meets in your home that identifies as the most simple expression of the church, can you multiply that? Can you multiply that if you don't have it? No. That's the point. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying if we want to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches, that simple expression of it, you have to have it in order to be able to pass it on, okay? And that's a relationship with a person and with a group of people intentionally that get that. So you cannot organize it until you have it. We grow in community with one another. So like if I hung out in Memphis, I guarantee you I'm going to be chopping it up with Raheem. Guarantee you, okay? Like why? We got stuff in common, man. You know? He's about hip hop. I'm about hip hop.
Make a beatbox.
Yeah. So, but the point is like he's like we're already in the tribe, bro. So so I'm gonna check it out. Like I'm gonna connect. Where do you think those guys connect? How they knew who to connect with, man? Like if you're about this, hey, watch this. In Kenya, I can immediately connect with people in Kenya that I know, with these people that are walking in these ways, and we can like totally do that relationally. Who's in charge? Who's in charge of that? Jesus? Where do we learn that from? Bible? We can totally do, there are 58 one another's in the Bible. 58 one another's. Love one another, provoke one another into love and good works, pray for one another, admonish one another. There's a lot, those are one another's. You know who you have to do the one another's with? One another. It's relational, always, before it's organizational. There's no sense in trying to organize it until you have it. Admit it, there are differences of administrations and differences of operations, but the self-same Spirit. So the reality is, share with Bob, you got Acts chapter 1, right? After that, the Holy Ghost has come upon you. You shall be witnesses unto me in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the world. You got Acts chapter 2, right? You see them meeting from house to house, okay? They're doing all that. And like it's being multiplied across the city. People are sharing the gospel. They're moving from house to house. They're continuing steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and breaking of bread, including the Lord's Supper, having all things in common. Totally like, doesn't that sound so cool? Yeah, man, that's cool. It's really awesome, right? Then you get to Acts chapter 6. This is all the church of churches that's in Jerusalem, right? And then the widows are being neglected in the daily administration. Where did they get that from? James wasn't even written yet, which is probably theologically the first book, the first chronological book of the New Testament, where it says pure religion and undefiled is to take care of the orphans and the widows and keep yourself unspotted from the world. That's not even written yet. How they knew they were supposed to take care of those widows in the daily administration? Somebody talked to them. So they're caring for that. You actually watch Matthew 25 happening because they did have what Jesus said. Hey, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. I was in prison, you visited me. I was a stranger and you. Yeah, so we're supposed to do all of Jesus' commandments. When you did it unto the least of these, my brothers and sisters, Jesus has favorites, the least, the lost, the last. So they were totally obeying that from, as disciples, churches emerged, and then you were actually seeing the transformation of the culture as salt and light on earth. It could be heard and it could be seen. Praise God. That's cool. Does that I'm compelled by that. FYI, that's the same thing that we're talking about. So, it's always relational before it's organizational. So if we actually existed inside of, hey, everything I have is yours. What if we actually realized, hey, we can love one another with a pure heart fervently. And that administration and operations would flow out of relational intimacy with God and with one another, in community with one another, and that they can spread from house to house, city to city, region to region, nation to nation. And that's really the Father's heart. So I'll give a silly illustration here. Is Memphis. If we wanted to do the laundry of everybody in the whole city of Memphis, okay? We wanted to take care of doing all the laundry. Now, a way of doing that would be we could pick out all the zip codes and we could buy property and we could build massive laundromats with industrial washers and dryers, okay? Now, this would cost a lot of money because we got to pay for the property. We got to pay the washers and dryers, okay? We got to be able to communicate to zip codes what time they're supposed to bring their laundry to these centralized places, okay? Like, this is going to be hard. Remember, simple things grow, simple things multiply. It's always relational before it's organizational. But that's a way of doing it. Or what if we just actually used all of the existing washers and dryers in homes? And we actually shared our washers and dryers with our neighbors. We could start a whole washing and drying movement. It's a silly illustration, but think about it. What if we actually used what we had and we shared it with one another? Simple things grow, simple things multiply. Love God, love your neighbor. It's always relational before it's organizational. Administration and operations will emerge from decentralized networks of disciples, leaders, and churches, but you don't start with that. You'll see leadership emerge as elders, deacons, however you view that stuff. But you will have leadership that emerges, that are providing oversight, that are serving that way in a decentralized way. Across geographical areas, across ethno-linguistic boundaries, across socioeconomic boundaries, across ethno-linguistic boundaries, and it will always, 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 always be relational before it's organizational. Seventh thing, this is, I think, like the culmination of John 17 for me, is we must all, every one of us here and then across the whole world, okay? This is Jesus' prayer. We must all connect, communicate, and collaborate in love and unity until the whole world knows. I'll say it again. We must all, relationally, not organizationally, connect, communicate, and collaborate in love and unity as disciples and churches until the whole world knows. That's John chapter 17, where he says, I pray that they might all, everyone everywhere, dwell together in such perfect unity. Why? That the world might know the Father sent the Son. To actually see the kingdom of God, the ecclesia that Jesus died for, visible and proclaimed to every tribe, nation, language, and tongue. And guess what happens then? Jesus comes back. Let's get after it. Who's in? We get to do this. This is why we exist. Jesus slain before the foundation of the world. Man separated from God and redeemed through Jesus in the fullness of time. that as the sons and daughters of God, the children in the church, manifest, visible, and heard relationally, connecting, communicating, collaborating freely, just like we read about in the Bible. What a concept, huh? So sometimes, like, zero condemnation, like where I was at, like when I came to faith at 23, I was just like Frank. I was like, bro, when I read this, this doesn't look like that. I was confused as a termite in a yo-yo. Like, what is, this doesn't look like that, man. And so I went through, this is all that I knew though. And it wasn't until inside of time that somebody shared with me, love God, love others, make disciples who do the same thing. But at that juncture, I was in my 50s, right? So I'm not condemning. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, like, hey, we can actually do this stuff with one another. Like, there's this other model that actually exists in other cities and places that, and one person that's been invited here to share, this exists in a Western context and in many other nations, okay? But I'd get this question. People go like, hey, well, that won't work in the United States. It does work in the United States. And it works in Muslim context. It works in Buddhist context. It works in atheist context. Shoot, it even works with left-handed plumbers. But it's not a pragmatic approach. In other words, like if you do this, like if it works, I'll do it. That's a bad question. Is it what he told us to do? Has he commanded us to make disciples of all nations and to train them to obey all his commandments with one another? That's all what it comes down to. And we do that in obedience to him by connecting with one another, by communicating and collaborating in love and unity as disciples and churches till the whole world knows. Last thing that I've learned, and it's the most, I've learned this one within the last year. So here it is. It didn't make the book because I just learned it. So number 8. If anybody wants to help me put this 8th thing inside of the book, okay, there's someone that has more administrative or operational capability than I do.
We can help you with
We can share, yeah. We can totally share, yeah. That's good. You know? I'll write it down. There you go. So we can model this right here, okay? Yes. Good friend of mine, Doug Lucas with Team Expansion, said, Lee, have you written that stuff down? I'm like, sorta. He said, well, like, why don't you like sort of like write it down and we'll put it into an ebook for you. I never got this stuff in an ebook. Somebody else helped me to do that. We can help one another. So I think it's super cool, like this with Thrivent, with Luke 2, okay, with Logos, like even the model of this last one that we've been experiencing. So here it is. I'm going to try and say it in a complete sentence. Is we can collaborate with everyone everywhere at some level. We can collaborate with everyone everywhere at some level. We cannot collaborate with everyone everywhere at every level. It's unity isn't uniformity. So we can collaborate with everyone everywhere at some level, but we cannot collaborate with everyone everywhere at every level. Let me give you an illustration. So disasters happen around the world. Bad things happen to the nations. I just moved to Fort Myers, sold my home, moved to Fort Myers, opened a business there, and there was a horrible hurricane that happened there. Guess what? There were massive amounts of resources that flooded in to Fort Myers for relief, to help people, right? But those massive those came from people that are completely unbelievers that cared, okay? That's all good. You know, they wanted to like help. Praise God. Guess what? We totally collaborated as disciples and churches with those people, not just for the 2 to 3 months, okay, since then, but with the end of recovery in mind. Not only relief, but recovery. And we had a strategy of, hey, we can totally help people by putting tarps on roof and having our businesses as distribution centers. And those people said, hey, can we stage our trucks there? Absolutely, buddy. And we even viewed the people that we were collaborating with as potential disciples and leaders in churches, because they were going to come in, and what if we actually trained them and we won people and they went back to their cities? What a concept, that what the enemy might have meant for evil, that God meant for good, to save much people alive. That's Genesis 50. Well, Romans 8's in there too. For we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose. So we can totally collaborate locally, nationally, and globally with people that are providing relief, disaster relief, okay? Wise as serpents, as harmless as doves. Say, hey, we want to do the same thing. Man, we're totally the Trojan horse. I'm totally going into those organizations and like, yeah, we have a workforce to distribute those stuff and stuff. Hey, let me tell you my story. Yeah, I was an orphan. You know, I know what disaster is, being dropped off at the orphanage, you know. And man, I was homeless. Like, I know what it is to be homeless. I know what it is to be hungry. Somebody shared with me about Jesus. Changed my life when I was 23. So I really have a heart for feeding people, for providing water to them, for taking care of the homeless, you know, like the stuff we're doing. Because now I get to do that and pass it on to share to others. Do you have a story like that? Can you tell I've thought about this? Like, it's a simple tool, a story inside a collaboration with people that are lost, or maybe they're even believers. But I'm looking intentionally to collaborate at whatever level that I can to work most closely with the people that want to multiply disciples, leaders, churches, and businesses, so that we have a scaling ecosystem from micro to macro. Now, there's most of the 70 or 80% of the people in this room, okay, think way more granularly than I do. Because that's vision, right? That's vision, and you go like, man, vision is good. We got to have vision. But we have to be able to get down to the granular stuff. That emerges out of relationships, not organization, and it emerges as connecting, communicating, collaborating in love and unity with disciples and leaders in churches. But that level, like Sister just asked me, how can we collaborate inside of these things, inside my country? Absolutely. We can actually do that. We're not limited. So again, I made this picture like this. I made you do this, and I made you do this. If we are free enough to actually do this and be intentional about understanding that we can collaborate at many different levels with everyone everywhere and not be silos. I love you guys, okay? You're not the Lutheran silo. It's just husband and wife from your home, you know, with your family. But we have silos, don't we? We have like the organizational silos, like the parachurch organizations, okay? And we have the denominational silos. And that's the opposite. The enemy always lies and divides from micro to macro. Because Jesus' prayer 3 times, and I'm done, he prays 3 times for the same thing. That we might be one, dwell together in perfect unity, connecting, communicating, collaborating, that the world might know. All the silos that divide us, the enemy is winning. For that white space to go away, to realize that the heart of God is for every person, every people, every place, to bow and confess that Jesus is Lord to the glory of God the Father. That's what we're supposed to be about. And I'll say again, you don't know me from Adam, okay? But you heard my story, and everything we have from Tampa to Fort Myers and beyond is we're honored to co-labor. We're on the same team, bringing it back to Larry. We are inclusive, not exclusive. Jesus is king. So I want to thank you guys for your time, for being invited to do this. And again, I left 15 minutes at the end to answer questions that you guys might have, because there takes 4 things to see a movement. So I'll share that with you and then take your questions. 4 things to see a movement. You have to have dissatisfaction with the present system. If you do not, I can't give that to you. Only God can. You have to have a measure of dissatisfaction with the present system. Did you ever think about this? The guy in hell, rich man and Lazarus, he says, hey, will you please send somebody to my 5 brothers so that they don't come to this awful place? I've shared with you the Father's heart today. For every person, every people, every place. God's heart. I think about this question. If we can't have the compassion of heaven, can we at least have the compassion of hell? So those things that are gaps for us, shortness of relational ties, really self-satisfied with where we're at in our country, okay? And the inertia of the present system, the prevailing model. We're not silos, we're not enemies, okay? We're not in competition. But the prevailing model actually impedes this other stuff. We have to be together. Like, we're co-laboring. So, I can't give you that first one. That has to come from God. I pray that you might have gotten some of that today from God, that he might have used me. But I can help you with the next 2. You have to have, number 2, knowledge of a better way. Disciples, churches. Simple, multiplying. Disciples and churches. You have to have knowledge of a better way. No matter how bad it was, I gave you a little bit of that today, okay? Knowledge of a better way. 3rd, you have to have knowledge of first steps. I shared that with you today too. Hey, you got some simple tools. Why does God love me? Who should I share that with? Oh, I got a list of 20. How do I do that? Oh, I can tell my story, I can tell God's story. Oh, I got a little format to follow that we can do a discovery Bible study and ask questions and we can hear God and obey. I gave you 2 and 3 today. Knowledge of first steps, knowledge of a better way, knowledge of first steps. 4th thing is, I can't help you with either. God has to. You have to have the 1st and 4th I can't help you with. The 4th thing is, you have to have those first 3 things in greater measure than the inertia to continue in the status quo. Pour deeply into the few who will obey no matter what the cost. That's sort of like, here you go. Now you got to do it. Dissatisfaction with the present system, knowledge of a better way, knowledge of first steps, greater than the inertia to continue in the status quo. To see a movement or a continuation of the movement of multiplying disciples, leaders, and churches. House to house, city to city, nation to nation. All right, 15 minutes. Questions? You don't feel like you have to ask them. We can get done early. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So, and I probably know the answer, but I want to hear you say it anyway. So, for a church like ours, we've been trying to do some of these things. Actually trying to do all of them with limited success. What's your advice to us?
Keep doing what you're doing. You'll get better at it. So I'll give you another tool that I think is interesting, and I don't think we shared with it, but I think inside of the existing models of churches, the leadership cell is a great tool. So in other words, if you pick people from inside of the church, okay, and you went through the short-term discipleship series and you cast vision of, okay, look, there's 10 of us here, okay, 5 couples, okay, there's 10 of us. Now, we're only going to do this for a short period of time. This is not going to be an ongoing church, okay, but we're going to use this leadership cell, and the goal from here is for us actually to birth 5 simple churches inside of geographically where you live at, where you're going out and you're seeking to find the person of peace, okay, and to make one disciple. So you could actually, after 10 weeks, conceptually, okay, you could actually birth 5 simple churches in geographical areas, okay, and they could actually begin to obey in those areas. While you still have your centralized, within 10 weeks, you can launch a decentralized network of 5 house churches. Now, exhortation in Uganda, I did this with a pastor of a church that had maybe 50 people. And I get that Uganda is not Memphis, okay? Okay, so I understand. But the principles and the tools are the same. So there are literally, as of 2018 or 19, like 2,000 of those in a number of different villages, right? It will be harder here because of every context has its challenges, okay? But I will say this, it was way harder in my gated community in Tampa than it was in the hood. So the first person of peace outside Amanda I found was Andre, Mama Net, and Andre in the University Mall area of Tampa. Pretty violent, gangs. But what we did is we found them. They said, come on in, man. I'll never forget the first 3/3 group that we did at Andre's house, man. Him and his nephew, they were blazing. You guys know what that is, right? They were smoking weed, okay? So me and my wife rolled on up in there, man, and Andre said, hey, man, these church people are going to come by, man. And his nephew said, we ain't changing. We ain't changing. So my wife I was acquainted with weed. But man, that billowed out, man. I'll never forget, there was this crackhead lady there, man, this refugee Vong student, okay, Andre and his nephew, man. And we sat down and we did Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. And there's light in that neighborhood now. There's a field in that neighborhood now. That house church is shared, okay? And there's a school in that neighborhood from there, man, for refugee students, okay? 22 nations in that apartment complex. Simple things grow. Simple things multiply. So all I'm saying, bro, to your question, to both of you guys, you got it. He gives the increase. Don't be discouraged. Be encouraged. Everything we have is yours. You're already bearing fruit. We're bearing fruit because you're trying, dude. That's powerful. It's the model. It's Memphis and Tampa, church of churches. It's Raheem. It's you guys. It's we. Look what Jesus is doing. See the bigger, like dream big, work small. Is that helpful? And I can help you with that. There's 2 great examples of this now in Topeka, Kansas, and in Denver. I can connect you to Ron Johnson that has a blended model that's actually working Restoration Church, okay? And these are guys I discipled that I poured into, okay? So there's resources to share. Cool. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Maybe spend about 45 seconds for the preamble before I ask the question.
Okay, I'll sit down. Oh, hang on. My bad. Test. I'm Frank.
I think it was November a year ago. The Pew Research Council, which probably most of you are familiar with, they're known to be a pretty fair-minded bunch. They wouldn't have been in business for probably a quarter century. In any regard, they started out with the idea of counting the number of Christians in the United States of America. And to widen the scope as much as possible, they divided how they were going to count said Christians into 4 groups. First group was your every Sunday Christian. Second group was your Christmas and Easter
CEO
folks. Third group was your weddings and funerals and baptisms group. Fourth group was people who call themselves Christians but never darken the door of a church. So using that preamble, I've heard two things today. One is based on growing the church by present relationships, one-on-one, disciples making disciples. You've done a very good job today reminding us of what that looks like. There's another theory, however, and it's called visioning. Visioning is something I can't get my arms around most of the time, because in the Christian community, that word means so many different things to so many different people. And I think, honestly, the denominational church is probably the leader, if you will, no matter what the denomination is, of that term visioning, which to a 77-year-old churchgoer all my life, I still can't get my arms around. Here's the question. How do you get those two concepts together to better serve God's church? How do you get the one-on-one disciples making disciples, which is the easier one, with the organized church, meet in the middle somewhere, or meet 2080 or 2575, but the end point is to grow God's church?
I got you. And I could actually draw the answer on, but I'm going to try and verbalize it, okay? So you got two legs, right? Two legs. So the one approach, making disciples who make disciples, okay? You always have to have a model, right? So you're familiar with the bell curve, right? So you have 0 to nothing, completely harvest, to the institutionalized church. So the institutionalized church has got a lot of inertia. It's got a lot of hierarchy, okay? And it's got a lot of years, okay? It's easier to give birth than it is to raise the dead. So one, if we have 80% of our weight on this thing that is most simple, and we trust Jesus and he begins to give the increase, and we're not shaking our fist at this other model because we love them, we honor them, we respect them. But the majority of our weight is over here in the harvest, or with people, like in the sense that they're far away from God, or they're believers and they actually come back to faith, okay? Is like as that begins to grow, we reach a point of where you have the midterm adopters and then maybe even the early late-term adopters. The answer to your question is keep doing what you're doing from the harvest and work with 80% of your weight here in the harvest and 20% of your weight here. Because you have to have the emerging model. So I've only got 2 of those kinds of churches in the United States to share with you, okay? There are 400,000 churches in the United States, all Heinz 57 variety. I got 2 models right now to share with you. That doesn't discourage me. I'm not discouraged. But I got 80% of my weight here, or maybe 70. It was definitely like 90 at first, okay? But shoot, nobody would invite me to do this 10 years ago, bro. They wouldn't. So the answer is happening. It's in process. And the other thing is, I didn't share this, but I want to. Where'd my phone go? Oh, there it is. I gave you a lot of numbers, but here are the 8 elements of actually seeing it happen. The 8 elements or movements are these. So you can write these down if you want to, and it's part of the answer. Is to see that happen, we have to have 1, extraordinary prayer. That's an element of movement. 2, we have to have strategic planning of that, and that's sort of like micro to macro, and you actually have to have models, right, at the city level. You can come to Tampa every 6 weeks, and you can actually see a model of it. We need that in other cities. So that exists in Rochester now. It actually exists in Traverse City. It exists in San Francisco. It exists in Houston. People don't know that. Like people in the organizational model and stuff, they go like, this doesn't work in the United States. Where is that? We're real spread out like they were on the walls, okay? So that's where the connect, communicate, collaborate. There are thousands of these across our nation now. We're disjointed. So we have to have strategic planning. 3, we have to have abundant gospel sharing. Tell your story. Tell God's story. Jesus gives the increase. If we're not, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. It's the power of God into salvation, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. We got to share the gospel. 4, we have to find the persons of peace that God. So I believe there are pastors of peace. I didn't invite this guy to Tampa. He's somebody, I don't even know the guy that you talked to that told you about Tampa. And that's probably because like 3 things happen as we get older. First, we lose our memory. The other 2 you can't remember. That's me. But they showed up and then they invited us back. Like, so basically we have to find the pastors of peace in this side that are willing to say, all right, I get it. I get this way. And not pragmatic. We'll go the hard, pour deeply into the few who will obey no matter what the cost, okay? 5, obedience-based discipleship. 6, simple churches. We can't be afraid of these. And so many pastors are afraid of these. They think that you're in competition with them, that you're going to be a sheep stealer. I'm not sheep stealing. Man, if I find anybody in the harvest that doesn't want to do this, man, I'm going to send them to your church. It's the truth. Priesthood of all believers. Everybody's supposed to obey. This stuff is in the Bible, bro. This is all in the Bible. I'm not a heretic. And 8, local leadership development, man. I'm going to pour gasoline on people like this dude, man. Like, I'm going to get him going to the Global Harvest Festival doing hip-hop. Like, I'm stoked about this stuff like this that happens. Everything I got's yours. Man, I want to help you in Kenya to do the same thing because we're on the same team. Like, only God could have made Larry do that devotion, man. Because I'll just ponder that thing, man. I'll just ponder it. So, inside of there is the answer to your question. I'm sorry I rambled.
Just one, am I still on the mic? Yeah. Just one follow-up at the risk of repeating myself. This same poll showed us that only 47% of the Americans polled claimed a relationship to any of those 4 categories. That is an all-time low for a country, the only country in history founded on Judeo-Christian principles. It's in the preambles of all 50 states of the United States of America. So what is the most influential body of America? At 47%, it's still the church. The question is, what do we have to do differently to change that ratio between what I would call the organized denominational church and the church that you describe as an entity that disciples are making disciples as its basic purpose?
Yeah. So I think it's worse, actually, than that. And I think it's declining rapidly. And, it's in the Bible too. A hoary head is a crown if it be found in the way of righteousness. We have to have older models, like aged men and women, some more aged than others. But we have to have aged examples. We have to have young men and young women, and we have to have children that actually model that not in an institutional way, but in a community way with one another. And that's the challenge of our nation, man. And so, but we can totally do that. We can totally say, I can do that for my neighborhood. I can do that with the people outside my door in my community, and that's what I'm doing for my house. Like, I'm 63 years old, I'm not thinking about retirement, man. My wife and I just started a business to model business incubatorship of what that is to have scaling, sustainable disciples, leaders, and churches across a smaller footprint. Fort Myers is only 80,000 people. The county is 800,000 people, okay? But it's called Lee County. I have my own county. So, Lee County. You guys pray for Lee County, okay? But it's a micro model, right? And that's the same thing Doc, that you get to do with your bride from your marriage in both places. It's super cool. I'm honored to co-labor.